My name is Charly Harbord. I work for Abertay University in Dundee, Scotland, which is a really good university in a very, very small city in Scotland. Um, and I'm going to talk to you about your experience and your values versus your qualifications. And the whole point of this is that you are more than just who you are on paper. And it's a really important thing to remember. And I think a lot of women don't realize this. So, what I'm going to do is take you on a journey through my background. And not because I think I'm fantastic, but because if you look at my paper qualifications, I really shouldn't be where I am right now, but I am. So, I want to help you think about different ways that you can change the way we view ourselves, maybe stop comparing ourselves to other people, and take chances. So, I grew up here. This is a farming community in the northeast of Scotland. Very beautiful, it's pastoral, it's idyllic, fresh air, all of that. As a very grumpy gothic teenager, I hated it. I thought it was so boring. It was like the worst place on the world to live or to have to be subjected to living in. And looking back, I realized what an ungrateful little so and so I was. But what this place, and this is basically just one farm on the picture, what it showed me was gaming. This is where I really got into gaming because I couldn't go anywhere when I lived here unless my parents, drove me. Um, Bearing in mind, and I don't want to scare too many people, but this was before the internet, before mobile phones. We're talking like the dark ages here. So I had an Atari Lynx. I was probably one of the only 5 people that ever owned one when everyone else had Game Boys. And I would play the heck out of my Lynx and out of console games and out of computer games, so Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And these games gave me a sense of escape. And this developed my love of gaming and a way to get away from this horrible country idyllic setting. We had these neighbours. These are Highland coos, which is Scottish for Highland cows. They were everywhere. Again, ungrateful teenager, thought they were boring and loud and noisy. Now, they're so cute and so fluffy. You're very correct, Samantha. They are so fluffy. And I would give anything to go back to that life. So, but as I said, as a very ungrateful teenager, I went from here to here. This is Fuzhou in southeast China, opposite Taiwan. It's a very small city in China, so only about 12 million people. Put this in context, the whole of Scotland only has about 5 million people. That's the whole of my country, 12 million in this city. And where I grew up, I think there was possibly only about 20 of us in the farming community. It was very different. It was fast paced, it was high tech. You can see the lights, the noise, you can almost feel the noise, the crowding. It was a massive, massive culture shock. And I stayed here for 8 years. But what I started to do here was to be able to access the game industry and to work in the industry. So I worked in localization, and we helped with sort of game design ideas as well. But whilst this was a tremendously big, scary shock, they also had places like this. So this is Sanfan Qixiang, which is 3 alleys, 7 lanes, 7 walls, sorry, in the middle of this hurly-burly, bustling city. And it's a traditional, well-preserved, ancient Chinese area. But what's special about this place is a lot of the game studios, a lot of the artists or designers would come here to take inspiration from, you know, the surroundings, to draw from life, to put it into traditional style Chinese games. And it was really good to be around that kind of atmosphere where you can see people being creative and you can see how inspiration can be drawn from this kind of thing. I mean, obviously, modern life crept in. As you can see here, this is McDonald's. In just the little red bit there, you can see is Starbucks. But they did it reasonably well. They were reasonably respectful of the culture. And again, that melding of two different cultures or two different time periods was really interesting to me, and something that I put, say, in my little box of tricks, in my way of thinking about things. So we go. So I went from China. I stayed there for 8 years. I did a degree whilst I was out there. I went and lived in Italy for, that's my doorbell. Went and lived in Italy for a year before I came back to Scotland and Dundee, where I worked and studied at Aberdeen University. So this is where I grew up, northeast of Scotland, and a little tiny farming village near the Highlands. It's China, so I flew all the way here to Fuzhou in Fujian, and this took, generally it's about a 3-day travel, so it's not exactly a hop on hop off kind of situation. I came back here to Dundee, where I now work at Aberdeen University. So essentially I went halfway around the world to end up working half an hour or an hour and a half away from where I grew up in the first place. So what has this experience given me? Well, let's look at the paper side of things first, because that's basically, a lot of us, that's all we think about ourselves. So it's given me a BA Hons in Mandarin and Chinese culture, which I got from Fuzhou Shida Daxue in Fuzhou, China. So I've studied in China and I've studied in the UK. I've taught in university in China and I've taught in university in the UK. I have a Master's of International Education from the University of Dundee. I am almost finished on a PhD in Games and Arts from Aberdeen University, and I am a Fellow of the Higher Education Academy, which again I got from Aberdeen. So on paper, great. There's nothing stands out there, really. There's many people with Masters in Education. There's many people with degrees in Mandarin. None of this, particularly the first two, point or indicate to the fact that I should be working in games education, or as a games designer. And none of this is the reason why I am where I am. I'm where I am because of certain values that I bring. And this is one of the questions I want you to think about. What value do you bring? And I don't want you to think about your qualifications. We're talking soft skills. We're talking about your experience. What is it that you makes you you, your you-ness, as it. So I research. I basically, for my PhD, I was doing educational psychology, and I started to want to join my love of gaming, which has never died, to my research into language learning. So I thought, what about role-playing games for language learning? How can we tie these together? So I spoke to one of my, yes, please feel free, list your unuses. I spoke to my friend that worked in the game school and said, do you think I could do this? And they said, yeah. And so why not give it a try? So with learning languages, there's no forum to practice. You can't go out. If I teach you Chinese, you can't go out to the local shops. Not that we can go out at the minute anyway, to practice your Chinese. My son is an inspiration. He's always been an inspiration, but I bought him a 3DS when we lived in China, but it was regionally locked to Japan. So he could only play Japanese games. And I thought this was, a bit of a drawback. However, within 3 or 4 months, he'd learned enough Japanese through gameplay that he could actually fully interact with games because he wanted to learn the language for playing. Um, there's a huge difference between the second language produced in a classroom and the second language that's produced in a game. This kind of idea of mutual language exchange, and also dyslexia in Mandarin. So I'm dyslexic, and the idea that Mandarin is actually easier for people with dyslexia was something that all provided inspiration for a PhD. And so by putting these ideas, being brave enough to go to someone and put these ideas forward, they said, yeah, I could do this in games. And that's my boy looking very happy that I made him the subject of a talk. So good for him. So I did research into avatars, perception, interaction, why we want to interact with people or not interact with people online. So I designed this set of avatars and did a bit of research on that. I have a chapter in digital games and language learning, which comes out next month. Made a poster, presented in Peru, wrote a chapter in this book, do research for in-game. These are all great, but my qualifications don't match up with what I'm doing now. But it's my interest, my expertise, but more than that, the fact that if someone asks you if you want to have a go at something, it's more likely you'll go, why not? What's the worst that could happen? So games design, I do games design, which is really super interesting, but I have no formal background in it, but I'm willing to try. And I think that willingness is something that's a really important value. So I was lucky enough and extremely honored last year to be the applied games designer for the Women in Games conference. And part of that, I designed an app, I made a guest book, blank style things as well. Through the app design, I'm now, through another connection, working with a First Nation elder to help him create an app to use as a dictionary. And this is all sort of knock-on effect. I designed my own game. I made it once in English and once in Chinese. It's exactly the same game, just two different languages. And that's been a really huge learning curve. But the point is, just because you don't know how to do something or you're not trained into how to do something doesn't mean you shouldn't try. Because, like, for example, with this, what is the worst that could happen? I could try to make a role-playing game and it didn't work. So I would just use another alternative. So I do localization, as we said. I've worked on these two games here, so Angels Online and Tales of Pirates. Sadly, Tales of Pirates is no longer available, but it was so cute. Angels Online is still available. And just recently, I've been, again, very honored and lucky enough to do a Chinese traditional simplified localization for Ava, which is a mobile online sort of a mobile tarot puzzle style game, which is just awesome. And again, it was that, do you want to try this? Why not? I'll give it a shot. I'll see what I can do. I teach. I love teaching. And I'm extremely lucky and very happy to work at Abertay University. And I work in the School of Design and Informatics in the Division of Games and Arts Research. This is our uni. Very small. There's like 3 buildings. But our game school is absolutely stellar, and I'm very lucky to work alongside some amazingly talented people. Oh, excellent. We've got Abertay students in as well. Brilliant. So this is an example of experience and value over qualifications. So the MPOF, which is the Masters of Professional Portfolio Orientation Program. So I was pulled in to work on this, not because of a degree or because of other qualifications, but because I've worked, lived, and studied and taught in both countries. So the educational cultures are so different in China and the UK. So Abertay University with Perfect World, which is a massive multimedia company in China, got together, created a school called Pixseed, where we train Chinese students and bring them up to speed, not only with academic English or English for games design, but also get them used to the educational culture. Um, and if I'm honest, get them a wee bit used to the Scottish accent, because a lot of Chinese people and a lot of people around the world, I guess, have never heard a gruff Glaswegian accent or a Dundonian accent. So we need to ease them in, gently. And then they would come across to Dundee for the MPOF, which we teach at Abertay. Adaptability. This is another thing that's really important. So again, using examples. So I wanted to make my RPG, and in the games industry and in games academia or in games design, workaround is a really, really important word. It means not giving up. It means finding another way to do something. So with my game, nothing off the shelf fitted the exact needs that I wanted. Um, I'm not a games designer. Well, I am now, but I'm not a coder, and I'm not, a 3D artist. I can't use Unity as much as I would love to. So I chose to use RPG Maker MV, which I could learn to create a game on, and that would reflect the language input exactly as I needed. And it was a really steep learning curve, but it was fantastic. And then we hit another wall, which is RPG Maker is single person. And I wanted a mutual collaboration with my players. So I needed a workaround. And that workaround was that I made the same game twice. So finding a way to solve a problem. Just because your balloons burst, don't throw your toys out the pram. Maybe you could use something else. Maybe there's another way. And in fact, sometimes adversity is actually the creator of the best ideas. You can come up with something really unique that can excel more than just the normal idea. So I really recommend that. A foot in the door. Now, this is really important. Um, there's a major issue that's happening with females, that it's very easy to leave university with a good degree and get an entry level job in the industry. But what is happening is that many, many females are not going for promotions. They're not moving any higher than that. And this tends to be because if women don't tick all of the essentials and all of the desirable criteria for a job, they tend not to apply. Um, but you need to understand that person who ticks all of those boxes, they actually don't exist. This is an imaginary perfect person. Um, the industry is littered with people who are very, very, very talented, but they're not team players, and it's harder for them to get a job. You can be a very, very good artist, but not a team player. It's not going to work. You can be a reasonable artist, willing to learn, really wanting to work in a team, and you stand a pretty good chance. So this foot in the door concept is that kind of based on what's the worst that could happen? Is it a chance to try something you love? Then do it if you have the time and if you can afford to. So a lot of well, exactly where I am right now is based on foot in the door. Can you do this little bit of teaching for us? Or can you work on this little project for us? And then it's grown and developed based on how I work with other people. And you need to think about that for yourselves. Your soft skills are so important. And you may not get the perfect job straight away, but you build something, and that something you're building is your professional reputation. And that's far more important than your qualifications. If we remember that we're still in an industry where you can be a bedroom coder, you can be a bedroom artist, and you can still get a really good job. You don't need, I work in a university, so I should preface this by everyone should go to university, but you don't need a university degree. Um, Potentially, although university degrees are great, go to uni. So other games related work. All of this is based on me literally saying, what is the worst that could happen? Okay, I'll give it a go. So I was honored to do a keynote speech for the United Nations Women in Games event on Mujeres Jam in Mexico. And I actually recorded it in Spanish, which was super interesting because I'm not a Spanish speaker, I'm a Chinese speaker. So that was a lot of fun. Um, I hold a few positions in Women in Games, which are all fantastic. Also, lucky enough to be a moderator on the She Plays Games Discord, which is a fantastic space for women. I did a keynote speech at Tangrande, Uganda at pre-Jam conference. That was in Colombia. I was a keynote speaker at Womanize Games and Tech Latin America. All of these keynotes and all of these have come from someone knowing me and someone thinking, hey, you've got something we want to listen to, or believing in me. And so it's really important that you understand that connections and making friends and putting yourself out there. And to be honest, if someone has said to me, do you want to present a keynote for the United Nations in a language you don't speak? My answer probably should have been no. But yeah, what was the worst that could happen? I offend a whole country? And it didn't happen. It was okay. I'm an organizer for the Caledonian Game Studies Reading Group, where we get together and we read academic papers based on games and discuss them. I was lucky enough to be a visiting lecturer at Norwich University of Arts. The fabulous Sharon Talani Sage asked me to do that, and that was so cool. I'm a PhD support mentor for computer science, and this is all across Scotland, so all Scotland's universities. And we provide mental health and support for any students that are having issues. And I'm the founder of the Kilted Daughter initiative, and that's the final thing I'll talk about, which is something that I really, on paper, should not be doing at all. But I am. So I heavily involved in Women in Games esports, in the Intergames jams. She Plays Games, again, fantastic. Also Critical Distance, which is a sort of website and podcast about with interviews with amazing people in the games industry. So I checked that out. So when I went to Peru to present, one of the guys out there that I met had offered me the chance to create some art for his game. And I just thought, why the hell not? I'll give it a go. So I did some houses. I've never drawn houses before. And the worst that can happen, he would say, no, I don't like them. But he did like them and he bought them, which was really cool. So now I have assets in a game, which is super sweet. I sculpt, but none of this is stuff that I have ever done through education. This is just stuff that I've done because I fancied trying something out. That's really important. Try new things and see what comes from it. Sometimes really, really amazing things. So future work. Now this is where I am now. As the Kilted Daughter initiative, I'm partnered with MG Alba, which is like BBC Alba, the Gaelic media station or media network in Scotland. My project is supported by the Scottish Government, Board na Gaelic, which is the Gaelic board from the government, and the Scottish Games Network, are all supporting something that I started as a drunken idea with a friend. And because people knew my reputation, my professional reputation, people knew how hard I worked, they've seen what I can do. This thing is now fully funded and we're taking off. And that's amazing. It's a Gaelic game, Scots Gaelic game jam. And that's so amazing because if you look at my qualifications on paper, I should not be founding or running this amazing project, and with such awesome people supporting me. Um, Literally because I'd said, "What's the worst that could happen? Let's give it a shot." A shot is try in Scottish. So, few thoughts to leave you with. I want you to try and think about women not as competitors, not as someone that you need to compete against or compare yourself to. There's always going to be someone who's better at art or richer or prettier or, God forbid, thinner than you. But when one of us succeeds, when one of us makes a mark in the games industry, we are all succeeding. So one woman's success is on the back of many other women who've paved that way for her. So build each other up. Don't be that person who is so insecure that you're threatened by another woman coming up, potentially who might be better than you. I really hope I know there's a lot of people that are better than me, and I'm really hopeful that they will take over as well because I need a holiday. So, this is the question I want you to think about, the one I want to leave with you. And we talked about this with the Eunice. What value do you bring apart from paper qualifications? What else? Is it team player? Are you willing to go that extra mile? What is it that makes you special, your unique selling point? And I can guarantee you all have major selling points and experiences that make you extremely, extremely valuable, more than a bit of paper or a degree. And when you next see a job that, maybe you don't meet all the criteria, send in an application anyway. Do it because what is the worst that could happen? And when you reach that goal and when you get to the pinnacle of your career, be this woman, be the one who turns around and helps the next person up. Don't be kicking her down the hill because you think she's going to take your job. Support and help each other. And that's where Women in Games comes in. That's the whole ethos of the entire wonderful community that has been built for women in games. So that is all I have to say. Thank you all very, very much for listening to me back. I appreciate it.
Hi, Charlie. That was great. Well done. We did get a few questions through. I didn't know if people wanted to join. You can ask to share your audio and video and ask question direct to Charlie. But we had Alexandra Bates says, "Hi, I'm from London and was wondering if you could help me. I'm graduating next year. My portfolio isn't as strong as I'd like. I'm thinking about further education. I don't want to do a master's. What are your thoughts on online courses? And have you heard of Gomon?"
I've heard of Nomon. I think this whole thing of what do I think of online courses is kind of a moot point because everything's online right now. And so what maybe was a certain amount of snobbishness about, oh, you got an open university degree as opposed to, it's all gone. It's all gone. In terms of building up your portfolio, if you're going into art, um, there's so many places that you can learn and build things up. What I would suggest is you maybe find courses that you want to that cover areas that you want to work on. So for example, if it's ZBrush or 3D texture rendering, find courses specific to that. Because when you're building your portfolio, it doesn't matter where that stuff comes from. It doesn't matter if it came from a university, it doesn't matter if it came from your head when you were in your bedroom. It is the fact that you've built up. So some of the things you can do in a portfolio, for example, is take a game, like let's, I don't know, Mario Kart, and create some additions to it. How would you enhance it in some way? Because then you're working from a frame of reference. Do mood boards, do so people can see the story that you're telling with the art. That's really, really important. But most of all, love what you're doing. If you're not feeling the vibe, then draw something else. And if you're looking at sort of online courses, there's so many out there. And there's really good ones that are based around building up a portfolio in particular. Yeah.
Thank you. So Anna Wickstrom asks, I would love to work in games in Asia, Japan or South Korea. I'm interested in knowing how I can make that transition without knowing the language.
Okay, right. So when I moved to China, I mean, I'm old as well, so I'm 45 now almost. When I moved to China, things like online learning of Mandarin just did not exist. Like you couldn't even learn it at a university. Um, and so I spoke no Chinese whatsoever. And I can guarantee if you are in a country immersed in their language and culture, you will start speaking that language pretty darn quickly. I think within 3 to 6 months, I was reasonably um, confident enough to be able to live independently. Um, Put feelers out. Always, like I said, what's the worst that can happen? Send out your CV, contact these games companies. Um, there's nothing wrong with going to someone and sending an email, not necessarily through HR, but someone you really admire within the industry and contacting them, which is sometimes one of the best ways. It's people get to know you, they get to put a name with a face. But if you can afford it and you're really willing to do it, I would suggest going to that country first on holiday or a break to scope it out. I wouldn't suggest going directly into that country to work because Asia, I mean, I love China. I really love China, but it is a different world. It's not everything that I think is normal here is upside down. It's completely different. It takes quite a while to get used to.
Thank you. Marnie Lewis asks, have you ever, why not, tried something and found out it's really not a fit for you?
Oh God, all the time, all the time. But then, what happened? Nothing. My life still went on, and so in fact, I went to university to study psychology as a hard science with biology and chemistry, and I learned very early on that it just was not for me because it was just really boring and full of stats. So I that didn't work out for me. There's been many situations in my life where I've tried something and it's not worked, but at least I tried, um, and I can say, that one ticked off. So as long as it's not something that's going to end up with you being hurt or in some way upset others, and it's reasonably low risk, I would just try whatever opportunity comes your way because that might be the one. And that's exactly what I did, and why I am where I am now. I'm very, very, very happy about it.
Very good. Rather try failing than not try fail at all.
Exactly. If you try and fail, at least you've
Yeah.
tried. But if you don't try, then you've done nothing, and that's worse, I think.
Okay, our last question before we wrap up. Lucy Maddox asks, how would you recommend demonstrating soft skills in an application?
So within an application, again, I would obviously you have to put down your qualifications, but you would also usually there's like contextual based questions. So I would demonstrate things there where you're kind of talking about real instances and specific examples of when you have been a team player or when you have tried something but it's failed, because it's fine to be in there. I'm this and I'm great and but that's not human. Everyone's failed. And actually, we're probably more interested in how you got over that failure. When you did try it and it didn't work out, what did you do then? And that's the workaround. But even with a workaround, sometimes there's a point where you just say, this isn't working. There's no point pursuing this. Let's try a different tack or try a different way to approach this issue. So try and think about how you can give specific examples that don't just talk about, I'm really good at stats or I wrote this piece of programming. Talk about a failure, talk about how you overcame, and talk about teamwork. These kind of soft skills, these understandings of the nature of humans, I guess.
Right, that's it for us. today, Charlie. That was really interesting. Thank you very much for your time. And thank you, everybody, for your input in the chat channel as well.
Definitely. I'm going to go back and read it and just feel all lovely. So thank you. And thank you for listening to me babble on. I really appreciate it.